excused myself and invited her to sit. Her eyes darted around the room, and then she sat down on one end of the couch, fidgeting with the ring on her index finger. I pulled up a chair next to her. The windowless room was not air-conditioned, and I was already starting to sweat in the heat of a late Virginia summer. I moved the standing fan a little closer and unbuttoned my white coat. "You did the right thing, Susan, by bringing Holly into the ER," I started. "Can you tell me what happened this evening?" "I came home from a late afternoon class," she said, "and found Holly passed out on her bed. I called out and shook her, but couldn't wake her up. So I called the dorm counselor, and she called the rescue squad to bring her here. I followed in my car." Still assuming Holly had overdosed on some medication, I asked, "Do you know what drugs she had taken?" Susan shook her head. "I didn't see any pill bottles," she said, "but I didn't look around for any." "Do you know whether she was taking any medication on a regular basis?" "Yeah, she was taking an antidepressant that she had gotten from the student health clinic." "Are there any other meds in the dorm that she might have taken?" "I have some medication for my seizures that I keep in the cabinet in the bathroom, but I don't know that she took any." "Did she drink regularly or use other drugs?" Susan shook her head again. "Not that I've seen." "Does she have any other medical problems?" "I don't think so, but I don't really know her that well. I didn't know her before we moved into the dorm a month ago." "But she was seeing someone at student health for depression? Had she been looking more depressed or anxious lately, or acting strangely?" Susan shrugged. "We weren't really that close. I didn't notice anything wrong." "I understand. Do you happen to know about any particular stresses she's been under lately?" "As far as I know, she's been doing well in her classes. I mean, it's an adjustment for all of us starting college, being away from home for the first time." Susan hesitated, then added, "But she was having problems with this guy she was dating." She paused again. "I think he might have been pushing her to do things." "Pushing her to do things?" Susan shrugged. "I don't know, that's just the feeling I got." I waited for her to continue, but she didn't. "You've been very helpful, Susan," I said. "Is there anything else that you think we should know?" Susan shrugged again. I waited again for her to say something else, but she didn't. I thought I might have seen a slight shudder. "How are you doing with all this?" I asked, touching her gently on the arm. "I'm okay," she said, too quickly. "But I have to get back to the dorm. I've got a paper to write." I nodded. "Well, thanks for bringing Holly in and for waiting to talk with me. Why don't you go back now and get to that paper? You can check on her in the morning if you want. We'll call you if we think of anything else." Susan nodded and stood up, and I walked her to the door. As I reached out to shake her hand, I again caught a glimpse of the stain on my tie and rebuttoned my lab coat so the ER staff wouldn't notice. I walked back down the hallway to Holly's room to see if she'd awakened by then. She was still out cold, and the sitter confirmed that she hadn't stirred since I'd left. There wasn't much more for me to do that evening. I spoke with the medical intern evaluating Holly, who said that he was going to admit her to the intensive care unit to monitor her irregular heartbeat. I then called the faculty psychiatrist who was backing me up that night. He agreed there was nothing more for me to do at that point, but told me to make sure I documented everything and that I should check back on Holly and talk with her first thing in the morning. I would have to present her case to the senior psychiatrists on the consultation team on their morning rounds at 8 a.m. As I walked across the parking lot to the on-call room, I congratulated myself on not making a fool of myself and on my good fortune to have the patient admitted to the ICU so the medical intern would be responsible for her admission note and orders that night, rather than me. When I entered the intensive care unit early the next morning, refreshed with a good night's sleep and a change of clothes, I scanned the rack at the nursing station for Holly's medical chart. One of the nurses was writing in it and looked up at me. "You're from psychiatry?" she asked. I nodded and said, "I'm Dr. Greyson." It was not hard to identify me as the shrink, as I was the only one in the ICU wearing street clothes under my white coat rather than scrubs. "Holly's awake now, and you can talk with her, but she's still pretty drowsy," the nurse said. "She's been stable all night except for a few PVCs, premature ventricular contractions." I knew that those irregular heartbeats could mean nothing.